You're about to hear one of the great stories of the Bible. This one is entitled Cats, and you'll hear it in poetry by Chris Widmer. In the Holy Bible, yes, that book of Holy Writ, is a story of some evil men, a king, a prayer, a pit. It tells us of a prophet, an aged godly man. They called him Belteshazzar, but his friends all called him Dan. He'd eaten all his veggies. It gave him vibrant health. He told the king the image dream. This brought him power, wealth. He warned old Nebuchadnezzar to be humble, holy, kind, and then he'd been there when the king first lost and then regained his mind. Now he is an old man, and he shuffles towards the hall. They know that he is the only man to read what's on the wall, and once he'd been Israeli, born of Abram's seed, then for a while a Babylonian, and now he was a Mede. Ancient? Yes. Antiquated? And soon to be promoted to the chief administrator. It was just the king who voted. Dan was one of just 3 men who ruled throughout the realm, 120 men below them, and Darius at the helm. When number 2 and number 3 heard they'd been overlooked, they set a plan in motion. We want this Jew's goose cooked. They dug into his background. He's perfect. What a mess. He uses no profanity. He just says no or yes. He's never had a wife on which he could have cheated. He's never ordered underlings beheaded or jailed or beaten. He's not prevaricated. He's never taken bribes. He's calm, cool, and collected. No angry diatribes. There's no graft or any corruption. No barrels filled with pork. Why, he even uses good manners when he uses a knife or fork. Well, we've got to hit on something. Something that'll get him busted. We do not want this captive eunuch over us and trusted. Finally, one man smiled a smile. It was a wicked, evil grin. Oh yes, I think I've got a way that we can do him in. We'll go and get a law passed how that none should stop to pray. You see, that is something this man does 3 times every day. Oh, yeah, perfect. Oh, perfect. They cackled with delight. They drew up all the papers, and the king signed them that night. Well, Belteshazzar heard the law, and he knew what they were trying. He knew they'd be across the street where they always did their spying. What's this? A law requiring I pray only to the king? Well, I'd better get up to my flat and pray about this thing. And so there he goes, his upper room. He flings the shutters back. No man-made resolution is going to get his faith off track. The old man in his chambers, like he always did before, though he was in his 80s, he kneels down on the floor. 2 men are in the bushes, soon to spring their stratagem, and there's one man at his window, praying towards Jerusalem. God of my forefathers, once again I call on thee. I'm thankful that I know thee and that you're the God of me. They passed a law against praying. I thought that you should know. And if I'm food for hungry creatures, well, it's a good green way to go. My God, you've never failed me, ever faithful. What a friend. This day I shall stand up for you, and if this should be my end, that's fine. I've got no worries if this thing brings on my nadir, but it'd also be okay with me if I died a little later. So, it really doesn't matter where or how or when. I trust you, God, to do what's best. Thank you. Amen. From across the street, the bushes move. We've got him. We've got him. Yes, we do. We won't have him be number one, said Commissioner number 2. These 2 men took their evidence and went off to spring their trap. We'll listen to a mighty roar. We'll hear his bones all snap. They went up to the steward. We must see the king now. They hurried up before him and made a little bow. Ahem, your majesty, excuse us. There is one man we found, ignoring your most recent laws and kneeling on the ground. The ink is hardly dry upon the papers, and yet he flaunts your edicts and he spits into your eye. If you'll notice in the fine print, the heretofores and whereats, this flaunting violator must be thrown into the cats. And this is the law of the Persians and Medes. It cannot now be changed. It simply, strictly needs to be enforced by nightfall. We trust you'll do what's right and have this one arrested and in your den tonight. And who is that? Darius asked. His tone said, I'm bored. Who would dare defy me and say I'm not their lord? Up till now, all things had gone according to their plan. They spat the name with venom. That captive Jew, that Dan. He's really quite the rebel. He flaunts your good decrees. We caught him 3 times yesterday down upon his knees. We've got the affidavits and even an artist sketch. When Darius heard his dear friend's name, he felt like he could retch. The king was sore displeased, not with Daniel, but himself. He looked over at the painting of his friend up on his shelf. How could I be so egotistic? How could I be so proud? I'll find a way to change his fate, the king then said out loud. But number 2 and number 3 came up to remind him, you must arrest this Hebrew. It's easy. You can find him at his desk or at his home, work or sleep or prayer. The laws of the Medes and the Persians can't be altered. Don't you dare. And so, as the sun was setting, they all were at the lair. Dan, the king, and number 2 and number 3 were there. The king said, Yah can save you. With a lump high in his throat, the schemers thought, like that'll happen. Chances are remote. The king said, Dan, I'm sorry. I didn't think of you. I shouldn't have signed this edict. What a stupid thing to do. The God you serve continually can save you if he will. That was all that he could say. The king was feeling ill. Daniel said, Don't worry, sire. My life is safe with God. And if it's my time to leave this world, I still will give him laud. But should he not be finished with the sorry likes of me, Your felines will not feed tonight. He told him, chapter 3, about the plain of Dura, and how that turned out good, how Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah stood. He told him of the mighty image and the royal sackbut band. His 3 friends wouldn't bow the knee, the only 3 to stand. He told him of the fiery furnace, heated super hot, and how their ropes all burned away, but flesh and hair did not. He told him of the 4th man that was seen inside the flame. Sire, my God knows I'm here today, and he just might do the same. But even if he doesn't, and this den becomes my grave, his heart will still be loving. His hand is strong to save. Okay, then let me summarize. See, this is what I'm saying. I trust my God completely, and you'll never stop my praying. With that, the old man turned, and he calmly faced the door. He heard a snarl, and then a growl, and a hiss, and then a roar. The king looked over at Daniel, so old and so alone, he didn't see God's angels that had gathered round that stone. The man of God then bowed his head. God, thanks again. Amen. Accuser number 3 called out, he breaks the law again. The prophet opened up his eyes and then slid the entry ramp down into the darkness where the air was rank and damp. He strained to make out shadows. He choked at every breath, for filling up his nostrils was the rancid reek of death. He brushed aside a spider's web. He kicked a femur bone. He didn't see the angels yet. He thought he was alone. Rodents chittered to his left. His ears buzzed from the gnats. He wondered when he'd catch a glimpse of big man-eating cats. One whiff. Hey, you! Huh? Would pull you over and like to melt your socks. See, in this den of kitties, there is no litter box. There was a mighty bellowing, the sound of screams and moans, wails and, oh, they got me, snapping, cracking bones. The plotters on the outside had dreamed that it would be so. And so the angels were the ones who made that noise. They put on quite a show. Dan heard a long, low, guttural growl that changed into a purr. A purr. Something big just rubbed my leg. Warm, dry, tawny fur. A great big male bared his fangs. Will this one do me in? No. It's clear this Leo just wants me just to scratch his chin. Hello there, kitty. A sound. Big pads on pavement. He thought, now my bones will snap. But then a couple kittens jumped up playfully in his lap. And then more beasts surrounded him and licked his hands and face. Daniel slipped off his sandals, for this was now a holy place. He took a long, deep, cleansing breath. He smelled now some perfume. The scent of springtime flowers now was wafting through the gloom. He glanced over in the corner. God's angel could now be seen. Daniel saw just one of them. There actually were 14. The den was filled with glory. He had no need for fright, and Daniel knew God's miracle was going to last all night. He fell down on his knees to say a praise-filled prayer. Thank you for the safety and the better smelling air. A schemer on the top side said, "This place makes my skin creep." They didn't know that down below, God's man was fast asleep, with arms draped round a great big head. His pillow was a mane. He drifted off to dreamland. They had put him in vain. Meanwhile, in the palace, the king slept not a wink. He knew what all Panthera did, the teeth, the claws, the stink. He used that den to kill before. He'd seen the whole pride feeding. He'd seen a death grip on a neck, and then the massive bleeding. He didn't want to think about the fate of his friend Dan. My massive kingly ego was the basis of their plan. The king played with his supper. He spurned his late-night snack. He'd give up half his kingdom just to bring his Daniel back. He too had heard the noises that came from in the cave, but he'd also heard about the furnace of God's mighty power to save. He wondered what had really happened in that den so deep. He lay down on his mattress, but he could not get to sleep. He wanted no musicians. He sent his dancers out. He tried to pray, but found no words. He wasn't that devout. He tried, but couldn't slumber. His gut felt like a rock. He was wide awake when servants called. "All's well! It's 2:00. And then 3. And then 4. Then 5. He heard them call each one. The Sandman wouldn't come for him. Oh, look, here comes the sun. Then in that early hour, he raced down to the den. The Bible tells us morning, just not precisely when. With anxious eyes and bated breath, he called through the first grate. He wondered, will the prophet hear, or had the pride all ate? "Daniel, who serves Yahweh? Are you in there, yet alive? Has your God worked a miracle and caused you to survive?" The seconds quickly ticked away. It must have felt like hours. From deep below there was a yawn. Dan's air still reeked of flowers. Lilac mixed with jasmine. He cracked his eyes in a blink. But Darius didn't smell the sweet. He just could smell the stink. And then a voice, a yawning voice. "Oh, yeah, good morning, sir. Yes, I had an awesome evening. You should feel their fur. O king, please live forever. The thing you ask is true. The God I serve did join me for my night inside your zoo. I had a great night sleeping, with 2 bellies for a bed. There's one thing you should know for sure. These large things really shed. There's hair, stuck to my robe, and there's hair stuck to my face. But that's the worst that's happened, sir, for my God's been in this place. Your king of beasts have seen this night the King of Kings, no match. And as for me, I'm glad to say I haven't got a scratch. You should see these awesome creatures, rough tongues, massive paws. For my God has sent his angel and has shut these darlings' jaws. Didn't he, you big lug? The king then gave the orders to haul Dan up and out. The angel in the corner smiled and then vanished through the grout. When he was gone, the Felid family growled with snarls and spats. They once again were vicious, who had just been pussycats. With an arm on Daniel's shoulder, the king gave the command that all throughout my kingdom and folks in every land should fear and honor Yahweh, the living God of signs, for he delivered Daniel from the jaws of these felines. And then he frowned at number 2. He glared at number 3. Grab these wicked schemers, their entire pedigree, for they did plot this evil, such manipulation sin. I say they shall be punished. I say we throw them in. The soldiers threw the first man in, and it caused a mighty roar. His head was off his shoulders, for his body hit the floor. His wife was cast behind him. A few thought it unfair, but, I guess I'll say it. She died while in midair. The children, too, would share this fate, each daughter and each son. The beasts would show no mercy. Those cats nabbed every one. They seized their prey by tooth and nail. 9 lives lost in that mud. Living, frisky people changed to flesh and bone and blood. They ate those tender victuals, then licked their whiskas, paws, amid the scraps of clothing, hats and shoes and bras. Now just 2 sounds are all one hears. What a fancy feast for lunch. Snarling growls and snapping bones. Crunch, 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 crunch.